you've had these watershed history-making cybersecurity events that have happened only in Ukraine. And it's hard, as a cybersecurity professional, as a threat intelligence person who works with threat intelligence people, you're concerned about the entire globe, but sometimes some places are just lightning rods.
In the world of technology, heroes are everywhere. They're overcoming disruption, delivering sustainable outcomes, and fearlessly forging the future to solve what's next. Join me, Ed McNamara, as we meet the people and businesses driving change in our constantly disruptive world. This is Innovation Heroes, a podcast brought to you by SHI. This episode is brought to you by Cisco. Anticipate, act, and simplify with the Cisco Secure Firewall. To learn more, call your SHI Account Executive or go to shi.com/Cisco. Welcome back to another episode of Innovation Heroes, the podcast exploring the people and businesses driving change in a constantly disrupted world. I'm your host, Ed McNamara. In the world of cybersecurity, threat intelligence agencies are taking down bad guys on a daily basis. They're protecting the U.S. energy grid, monitoring the dark web, and being on site in the Ukraine. This week's guest, Joe Marshall, has been identifying and protecting all of us from dangerous cyber attacks happening around the world. He is a senior security strategist at Cisco Talos Intelligence Group, one of the largest commercial threat intelligence teams in the world. Joe is part of a diverse team of 500 people, including everyone from linguists to engineers. They collect massive amounts of data every day and turn it into actionable intelligence. Talos has been in Ukraine since 2016, protecting critical infrastructure like power grids, water, gas, airspace, and more. I'm looking forward to hearing his stories, whichever ones he could tell us anyway, and gaining some insights just in time for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Joe, thanks for being here today.
Oh, well, Ed, thank you all for having me, man.
So I'm going to poke fun at myself because National Cybersecurity Month, after I say an introduction like that, you've got to kind of smile a little bit and say, oh, that's great when a marketing person talks about Cybersecurity Month. I've actually been on site in the Ukraine, and I wanted to really start with that. That is not just a throwaway mention. How did your team get on the ground there? And I'm thinking about our employees who complain about coming to the office, and you guys are on site in basically a war zone. Can you tell us more about Talos's role in the Ukraine these days?
Oh man, that's a great question, and it's a complicated answer. So let's go back to hallowed antiquity, right? Let's go back to 2016, 2014, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ukraine as a country has been the focus of so much political and global upheaval, especially since 2014, when they had elections and a pro-Ukrainian president was brought into power and the pro-Russian president was effectively run out of the country. Mm-hmm. The Russian government wanted a sympathetic government to them. And because the Russian government had both financial and, I guess, logistical interests in having, a warm water port in Crimea, and they were, not counting sort of the for lack of a better phrase, fascist ideas that Ukraine is really Russia or something along those lines, which is a whole political and ethnic thing over there. But so, when they realized that they weren't going to have a sympathetic government over there, they basically said, well, I guess we're just going to invade Ukraine. And then that's what they did. And that was like in 2015, right? And that was when Crimea was taken, when the Donetsk, Donbass, Luhansk area of Ukraine was occupied. And that precipitated sort of this really crazy event in cybersecurity history. It just sort of snowballed. So in 2016, we had the first time, late 2015, 2016 is when we had the first ever recorded attack on an electric power grid through a cyber attack, through black energy. And then a year later, we would have the same thing happening in another area of Ukraine and Kyiv when a transmission substation was hit with something called End Destroyer. And then after that, you had, not Petya. You've had these watershed history-making cybersecurity events that have happened only in Ukraine. And it's hard, as a cybersecurity professional, as a threat intelligence person who works with threat intelligence people, you're concerned about the entire globe, but sometimes some places are just lightning rods. And, we, as a cybersecurity professional who focuses on critical infrastructure and power grids and things like that, when I heard that had happened, I knew it had never happened anywhere else that we were remotely aware of. And I went, man, I've got to get to Ukraine as fast as possible. The problem is that you don't hop on a plane, fly over there and go,
Right.
Hey, I'm an American. I'm here to help you now. Like, they're going to look at you somewhat askew, and they should. So, because I work for Cisco, Talos is the threat intelligence arm of our customers here for Cisco. We're frankly a very large company, and we've got Salesforce globally. And basically, we were incredibly fortunate to tap the Cisco Salesforce team in Ukraine, in Kyiv specifically, and said, "Hey, we'd love to meet some of your customers. We really want to talk to them about cybersecurity." And one of the neat things about what I do and where I work is, with a small asterisk, a notable exception of our incident response guys and gals, I'm not fee for service. Most of the 500 of us, 450 we're not billable. We're never going to be billable.
Right.
So I get to show up with no agenda. I get to go, look, I have a budget, I have runway. Cisco and Talos have empowered me to go stop bad people. You're getting hit by bad people. What can I do to help? Because I'm going to learn and protect my customers, but I get to help you too. And we have a pretty strong social mission here in Talos. We don't like bullies. But because of that, we and and that comes from our leadership. It comes from all the way very top of Cisco to our vice president here at Talos. Go stop the bad guys. We'll worry about paying for it later. Just go stop them. And it's a pretty rad place to work. And it's a really cool mission. And that's how we got there in 2016. We said, let us help you. This is not a sales call. We want to help you. And it took a while to earn their trust. They were very skeptical of just Americans showing up on their doorstep and going, "Oh, you're here to help. What are you here to really do?" And we're like, "Look, we don't have an agenda. Let us be a part of this. We're giving you all of our kit for free. Let us just be here with you, present with you, and let us assist you." And it took years to do that, but it has paid untold dividends, both in Talos's mission to piss off the bad guys, as we say, and also keep people safe and stay at the tip of the spear. And that's really what this is. And here's a dirty secret for any threat intelligence folks who listen to this. And if you're ever wondering, like how do you know what to do and where to go when you're in the threat intelligence business? If you really want the straight dope, you want the straight truth, go to the least capable, not the most capable. Go to the guys and gals who are struggling every day to fight off much more advanced adversaries, to keep the lights on and to keep their businesses and way of life working. And you'll see innovation. You'll see the real deal. And Ukraine in 2016 was like that, and they've improved dramatically since then. But that's why we were there, is because we knew that's where it was. And sometimes it's not looking at a monitor. You got to get on a plane and fly there, and that's what we did. Yeah, that's what we did.
And I mean, it just seems, for lack of a better word, a privilege, because, we've all, anybody who's been in corporate America has been through the training modules and saying, cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. And it's all about brand reputation and any number of these other things. And you're like, this is a whole next level. Like, really, I mean, these are patriots on the front line, which just must have been incredible.
Yeah, no, I've had the privilege to go to Ukraine twice, to work with power grid companies out there and attend some conferences. And you want to talk about being inspired. Like they know what they're up against. They are incredibly smart and capable. They just don't have, United States of America resources to combat these things. And I know that, especially as of late, I've been working a lot with Ukrainians, especially in the power grid area. They're grateful for all the help that they can get, and we're more than happy to have them. I have coworkers, of the 500 of us who are in Cisco Talos. We're actually probably closer to like 530 now. We've grown a lot. a lot of them are Ukrainian. They help manage a lot of our back end engines for like our appliances that we sell and our detection telemetry and things like that. And they've been with us since 2015. They've been with us a long time. So we have colleagues and friends who are being shot at and bombed and having to go duck into air raid shelters in the middle of meetings. We've had a few enlist in the army.
Right.
When I talk to my Ukrainian folks that I'm helping, we have to schedule our meetings in the morning because they don't want to be stuck out anywhere at night if air raids happen, because a lot of the air raids that happen in Ukraine are nighttime air raids for these SHI drones and these cruise missiles that come in. They do it under cover of night. And they just don't want to be outside when it happens. Recently I was talking to someone at a power company whom I'm doing a lot of work with for GPS jamming and whatnot. And he was working from home, which is unusual for him. And I was like, "Hey, you're home." He goes, "Oh yeah, today's Ukrainian Independence Day. We expect to get bombed, so everyone's working from home."
Wow.
And I'm like, how do you drop that in a casual conversation? And you're like, I complained because traffic was bad on the way to work.
Right.
And, I wasn't having to dodge missiles and drones, and it's wild. It's unbelievably wild. Anything, and I can tell you personally, having talked with them and worked with them so much, anything you see in the news is way, way worse. You're only getting a small sample of it. It's wild.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. I mean, the reports of major issues with cybersecurity in Eastern Europe, that's kind of nothing new. But now it's places like, medical centers and things like that are being, hit by attacks. How's the situation evolved, and how would you describe it currently?
Do you mean like from a cyber or from a other?
Yeah, I mean, just I will stick to cyber, sure.
Sure. In country over there, it's a little different because cyber attacks can be expensive, and here's the truth about cybersecurity attackers in general: they're never going to be as complicated as they have to be, no more, no less. So there's this very funny comic that a lot of us cybersecurity nerds reference from a comic artist named Randall Munroe from XKCD, where the first panel is, his password's AES 256-bit encrypted, and it'll take us 30 years to guess it with a computer. And panel 2 is hit him with a wrench until he tells us his password, right? So we're at the hit him with a wrench part, which is if it's dumb and it works, it's not dumb. So right. What we typically see from a cybersecurity perspective over there is very wide swaths, opportunistic targeting of all sectors, especially critical infrastructure services, power, telecommunications, banking, heck, a little bit of agriculture, but also keep in mind, like, these things have to align with the interests, the tactical and military interests of the Russian occupiers, right? Where we see a lot also is a lot of disinformation campaigns are still very active right now, especially in bordering Eastern European countries that are not your Belarus's, but think your Estonias, your Lithuanias, your Moldovas, your Romanias, or things like that, where, the Russians are your friends, or they have an ethnic Russian minority that lives there, and they're going to, you're the oppressed ones, come join your Russian family, things like that. So it is that's kind of what we're seeing. So from a medical center perspective, actually, mostly what we see is kinetic targeting. And we don't really know if it's deliberate or if it's miscalculation or if it's just outright terrorism. There's no shortage of medical centers being targeted in the news, and it's very sobering to go read. And I don't encourage it unless you feel like, just know what you're getting into if you go look at it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned the disinformation campaign, and I'm kind of like, how do you set the scope of where your involvement begins and ends? Because I feel like there's so many different, attacks or things that you have linguists, you're doing all kinds of monitoring. I'm sure you see all kinds of stuff, but you're like, I know that XYZ is messed up, but I've got to stay focused on this. Like, how do you decide, like, I know that's not right, but I gotta keep my head over here.
So, and that's a great call out. The reality is that we have no choice but to, because at the end of the day, our constituents and our customers at who rely on Talos to protect them, our effective mechanism of change is going to be through the products, right? So if we see malware, obviously our XDR solution, our suite is going to flag that. That's a mechanism, right? That's an endpoint
Right.
detection. I can immediately say, no, this computer will not be attacked by X or Y. Same thing for email, same thing for web or DNS or wherever in our portfolio, our customer happens to sit, because that's what we do. That's the intelligence that we collect. It feeds into that entire product portfolio, where you kind of have to go, that's interesting, but realize that what can you do with it is what I call being a student of the game. So what do I mean by that? So let's say that we're going to notice disinformation campaigns targeting Estonia, right?
Okay.
And so that might be specific phishing lures that we might see that might be related to that specifically. That may be in English, maybe in Russian. We don't know. The meta knowledge of that can help us think about detection, even though it's not necessarily something that we can directly address, because we're not a disinformation combating organization. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's another ball of wax. It's not us.
Yep.
But being aware of it can help guide detection decisions when we think about who is coming at who, how are they coming at them, and then what can be weaponized about that. So a good example would be on Talos blog, we had an Asian group called Mustang Panda targeting NATO countries, and they were using, I think, a European Council of Foreign Affairs, really nice phishing emails, beautiful letterhead. Like, you look at this document, and you'd be like, yeah, this seems legit. And of course, it had an implant inside of it. But they, were utilizing the conflict in Ukraine to be able to embed these lures, and then the lures, and of course, had the maliciousness inside of the document. So that was them harnessing this for momentum to launch their attacks. So, like, that is a meta thing, and I just call it being a student of the game, right? It's not just technical stuff per se. It's understanding a little bit of geopolitics, understanding a little bit of, to quote the great philosopher and comedian Ron White, not that the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing, right?
Right.
So, and that will actually, in a more meta sense, make you a much more complete professional.
You know that cyber attacks continue to evolve. They're getting more complex, more pervasive, and frankly, more scary. And at the same time, your workers, offices, and data are being spread across the world. How do you make sure you don't get attacked? Protecting critical data is key, and resilience starts by securing the core of your infrastructure. In a world where the network is significantly more complicated than ever, you need a firewall fit for today's challenges. The Cisco Secure Firewall simplifies and brings clarity to your network, allowing you to regain control. It protects apps and employees across many environments, including hybrid and multi-cloud. Cisco Secure Firewall was found to reduce the risk of breach by up to 80%. That's according to the latest Forrester Total Economic Impact Report. Cisco sees more than other firewall providers, even with encrypted traffic. That means you have increased visibility across all your systems. On top of reduced risk, threat intelligence updates are distributed hourly by Cisco Talos to enhance your protection. Recover from disasters stronger than before. To learn more about how the Cisco Secure Firewall can increase your security efficiency while reducing cost, call your SHI Account Executive or go to shi.com/Cisco. So with 500 or 530 plus that you said that you have in your organization, Talos works with other organizations like law enforcement, the UN, Interpol to stop criminal activity. Can you tell us more about how these partnerships work and how that data is shared?
Well, I'll say what I can't say.
Right.
How about that?
That's all you can do.
So this is the truth of any threat intelligence organization that in the world, and that is, we all work together, even like Cisco's competitors. I call them competimates, right? Because if you think of things like the Cyber Threat Alliance, where we have all of these companies, your Cisco's, your IBMs, your Palo Altos, because we collectively decided that everyone should be protected from serious threats, not just our customers, right? So if we find something that no one else has seen, we want to make sure that everyone is protected. The same thing applies to, say, like law enforcement, here in the United States or internationally. And all their dirty secret is that nobody sees everything. There's no such thing. There's just no silver bullet for any of this. So if we see a major nation state campaign, we certainly have with, say, Ukraine, if we see something bad happening, we notify the government. But because we've built inroads to talk to those folks and go, hey, you need to be aware of this. This is bad. Here's our data and our information. We'll share it with you direct. And then we'll stand up a war room and we'll work with them. Sometimes it's, hey, I found a weird thing. Have you seen this? And of course, everything is NDA'd and enshrined in nice legal, bulletproof, ironclad way of discussing these details. And sometimes it's a back and forth, and sometimes it goes nowhere, and sometimes it's, hey, that was a great tip, thanks. It really depends. It really, really depends. It's very context sensitive, but I can tell you that it has paid untold dividends to ourselves and to our partners to have these relationships. Because you get brought into, or you bring them into things that you realize you just could not do without them.
Right.
And also sometimes it's a mandate issue. Like, so if I'm say United States and I have an international thing and my remit is only in the continental United States, well, I can't do anything about that. But I know a really great private security company, Cisco Talos, and they can do something about that. And so, yeah, it does kind of pan out in a sort of roundabout way. I'm not trying to be vague, but it really, yeah, it's kind of how it is.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the United States too, because we've been focused on Ukraine for the first part here, but closer to home, how real is the threat of something like a wide scale power shutdown or infrastructure attack in the U.S.? I mean, I saw a report that said in 2022 there were something like 163 physical attacks on the U.S. power grid. I was like, wait, I don't think I've heard about any of those, and it was an increase of like 71% from the year before. Like if people, do people, the general public, I'm sure doesn't know that, and what's the threat risk here?
Oh, that's a heck of a pivot. All right. Whew, okay. All right. So I've worked in, before I came over to Talos, I worked in the investor-owned utility space, and I've been doing this pretty good while now. So I have seen some pretty wild stuff in my time, either me personally or through colleagues who are in other places who are telling me, over a beer, hey, you're not going to believe what I just saw. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. So, the physical tax thing is, a lot of it is something that's really been worrying a lot of folks. I live in Baltimore, and we had, I think, neo-Nazis getting ready to target some substations around here, and they were going to go shoot them up. We had the North Carolina attacks last year, I believe.
Right.
We had the Florida attacks where somebody just went out with guns and just started blowing up transformers and shooting them. Years prior to that, I want to say 2013, we had the Metcalf Station attack in California, where folks were just lobbing bullets into transformers. I can't tell you what the trend is, why, other than maybe copycat attacks. That's for folks who focus on that, who are smarter than me.
Right.
But, there is certainly an accelerationist, anarchist / fascist movement going into it, where they're like, you can go find them, their manifestos online. It's unhinged, not realizing that life sucks if you don't have power. So, like, I don't know, like, why they thought they could do that. Substations, for the most part, they're not armored. They probably have a fence you can crawl under. These are public service elements. They're dangerous. No one should ever go inside of one. You can die quite easily.
Right.
There's just, it's just insane to think about, like why would anyone want to go do this? But it happens, unfortunately. Sometimes it's and I'm from Alabama. Sometimes it's JT and Bubba and his buddies with a case of beer, a shotgun, and hey, let's go shoot that substation up.
That's a Saturday night for you, right there.
I'm from a small town Alabama, guys. That's a pretty good night. And that's actually incredibly common, believe it or not. Like, if you're in the middle of nowhere and you got nothing else to do, let's go shoot something that looks expensive. Sure, why not? Yeah, I mean, that actually very much does happen. Now, I can't give you like the trend, like what it was like 3 years ago versus what it was last year.
Right.
But definitely some extremely high profile physical attacks. I think you said something about grid stability too in general. Was that part two to that question?
Yeah, I saw that. You had joked in an online article that we found about animals like squirrels and snakes cause more power outages in modern history than cyber attacks even. And I remember 2003, like a couple of tree branches in Ohio made the lights go out here in New York City. Mm-hmm. I'm really simplifying, but do you think we should have more faith in the resiliency of our most critical infrastructure.
I love that you said that, because not many people know how that hot mess even started.
I was here, so I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's a good. Why is it always Ohio's fault, right? Those Ohioans. Yeah, you know what? So I'll give you an example of what gives me faith in the electric grid. So grid is really not the right word. It's singular, but really we're talking about plural grids. United States is just ginormous, and it's got numerous. A friend of mine calls it a patchwork quilt of electric grids, and I'm like, checks out. That's a good analogy for it. Yeah, that's why a hurricane can come through Florida and Maryland. I don't lose power, right? It's not all interconnected, right? Because the American power grid is probably the largest, most complicated engineering man-made project in the world.
Wow.
So we have electricity infrastructure here that is the first of any kind that was built anywhere in the world for the most part.
Right.
So we're think about how old the power grid is, and then think about how old cybersecurity is, and like it's not even close, right?
Right.
So I'm going to put you in a situation. It's a hot day in Alabama, and it's the middle of the summer. It's 106 on the heat index, 100% humidity, and then everybody loses power.
Right.
All right. You're going to have a bad time. All right. I call that involuntary camping. You are going to be, and I hope you got a fan or something, because you're going to be sweating.
Yeah.
Well, when why did the power go out? Well, probably because a squirrel touched something on a transformer, bridged the A and the B, and caused a thing, and the transformer popped. Happens all the time. Snakes do it a lot, actually, because like they're going after birds' nests, and a bird will make their nest in a light pole, and they'll come over to go get the eggs. And snakes are long, noodly things, and they can touch multiple things at once, and then boom, there you go. And when they replace the transformer, or when they fix it and they allow everything to turn back on, the first thing that's going to happen is everyone's ACs are going to turn on full blast immediately, right? So they have designed the electric grid to handle what we call an on-ramp, a massive flux of draw coming in, right? So you have really smart people who are building this power grid to do really, really cool stuff, and they think about things like this, but nobody has invented a squirrel-proof electric grid yet, and if they can make millions if they figure it out, I can tell you that much.
I'm guessing you stay away from social media, because if the lights so much flicker in my town, like my small town, Facebook page goes crazy with the power was out for a split second and I had to restart my cable. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're staying away from that, because I don't sense you're going to tolerate that too much.
You know what? It's I think in my older years, I've just learned to let everyone nope, you're 100% correct. That's right. It was the North Koreans. It was aliens. You're right. That's what caused the power grid to go out. I'm not going to argue with you. My energy is better spent elsewhere, man. Just agree with them and let it go. That's what you got to do. I feel you. Like think about how what I like to joke is I'm not in the cybersecurity business. I'm in the civilization business, right?
Right.
Yeah, because lights have got to turn on. We love air conditioning. Water needs to be drinkable. Elevators got to go up and got to go down. We need gas for our vehicles and things like that. So, like when those things get taken away, then you realize just what a marvel things like indoor plumbing and drinkable water really are. So,
absolutely. Feeling overwhelmed by all the buzz? Think Gen AI might be a game changer, but don't know where to start? SHI has you covered. We're rolling out a new series of executive briefings and workshops focused on generative AI. These aren't just any briefings. They're your roadmap to innovation designed by technology experts you can trust. These 5 new offerings dive deep, exploring what AI runs in, what it runs on, and what it's used for. From establishing your own Gen AI program from the ground up, to high-level overviews of Gen AI in cybersecurity and the Microsoft ecosystem, there's a briefing custom-built for your needs. So what's your next move? Contact your SHI Account Executive today, or head to shi.com to request your briefing. Your journey into generative AI begins now. You're reminding me of I always make movie references, but Stephen King's The Stand, that miniseries, when the power went out, they had I think it was called the shutdown committee or something like that, where they had people go around the house and just turn things off for when everything came back on again. It was like, I would have even thought of that.
No.
Not a chance. So Talos is collecting massive amounts of raw data from places like the dark web, product performance data, other research. Can you tell us more about how Talos collects this data and how it's turned into actionable intelligence?
Ooh, that's a tough question because we collect a lot of it. We ingest about ballparkish every day about 6 petabytes of threat telemetry.
Wow.
And that is going to be, malware samples. It's going to be URLs. It's going to be spam emails. It's going to be any kind of anything that we collect homegrown from our customer base that is reported back to us, and so that we can turn around, analyze, and then make sure, detect once, protect everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is just it's so much data that as a threat researcher, it's really great, but it's also daunting because let's say like this morning, for example, is a great example. I got given an IP address from one of our partners, and they're like, "Hey, what are you seeing with this?" And I'm like, if I start pulling that thread, I could be here all day because that IP could lead to other things, which could lead to other things, which can lead to other things. And then 5 hours of my life is gone. Well spent, mind you, usually. But I mean, that's just what happens. Such is the dearth of data and the pivots that I can make with our internal data. And also shout out to my colleague who actually did that heavy lift for me this morning because I was so busy. But that's a good example of like what we would be able to do with just one indicator, and I call it thread pulling. No one should ever join cybersecurity to be in the closure business because sometimes you're going to get questions you're not going to find an answer to. But like when I'm pulling a thread, like a specific suspect IP address, sometimes that goes nowhere. But I find another thread to pull, and I'll pull on that one. And before you know it, I've uncovered something new or neat, novel, or just interesting that I can file away. And sometimes it's a whammy. It turns out to be a nothing burger. That happens. That's the gig. But when you're working at that breadth, depth, and scope of just volume of data, that's a good example of that. A lot of it also is like I call it your artisanal homegrown threat intelligence, right? This is dark web research. This is personas that are on the internet. These are, forums or cartels that have been infiltrated. This is, relationships that exist. Gosh only knows. I'm not privy to that data or information for good reasons. But we have to stay abreast of what the bad guys are doing. And that means, going onto the dark web or other places and just being like, who is, like, for instance, brokered access. I've got a hospital in Thailand, and for $30,000 US, I'll give you the full domain and administrator credentials to it, and you can go attack them with ransomware and make your money back and then some. Right. We see that all the time, where it's either an eBay-esque style auction, or it's just give me $3,500 and I'll give you, the VPN tunnel that I used and the creds for a pediatric oncology center in Florida, which I actually have seen. I saw the names, dates of births, and social security numbers of kids just flying across my screen.
Oh man.
Yeah, and like these ransomware actors are as mercenary as it gets. They do not care. So yeah.
I like what you said about you really touched on it very quickly about you said a characteristic about joining cybersecurity, and there's a lot of tech savvy people out there, and even more coming out of schools every year. You're on a team of over 500 people. There's linguists, there's engineers, and just about everybody in between. I'm guessing pretty quickly who might be a good fit for your team and who are not. Like, what characteristics, if somebody's considering this kind of career in cybersecurity, or if people are hiring teams and building them out, what characteristics are you looking for when you hire, or what do you say? Like, if you see something in somebody, or somebody says something in an interview and you're like, not him, definitely her, not him, we'll have to have a second interview on that one. Do you have any of those kind of warning signs or green flags?
Yeah, no, I love these questions because much like the Supreme Court and obscenity, you know it when you see it, right?
Right. Right.
But there are a few things that I think of that have really stood out to me over the years, and that's both as a manager, a former manager who used to hire really, really smart hackers,
Right.
and now as somebody who gets to work with brilliant hackers every day. I can tell you first and foremost what we don't care about. We don't care, you know, or walk that back. Here are the two most important qualities in general, and they are have a good attitude, be easy to work with.
Nice.
And that's just probably any career, to be honest with you, right? So, but what we look for here is the forever student hacker mentality, which is you're going to be confronted with difficult technical problems and you are not going to know the answers. And what we look for is a lot of self-reliance. Not that we expect you to be a genius and nobody comes out of the womb a hacker.
Right.
We're not looking for people who know it all. We're looking for people who are just bad at giving up. Right. So they go to them, they say, you know what, there's an answer to this, and I'm not going to stop until I find an answer or until I go insane, whichever happens first. and that might be, unpacking a new piece of malware that they've never seen before, that's doing something unique and new and novel, but like you're going to have to step your game up to be able to do that. And then I think something that's going to help, like if you're entry level and you're like, I don't know, like having a strong technical foundation. So, for instance, I was going to talk to you about something like DNS security, right, or cache poisoning or something around that.
Right.
But you don't know how DNS works. Well, then cybersecurity is going to be tough for you. But in fact, if you can't fundamentally understand how the basics of, say, something like that works, so there is a foundational, fundamental, technical thing that we think is really important. But I also want to caveat with this, like if you were to take cybersecurity, if you're thinking to yourself, man, I'm not a super techie, I don't know if cybersecurity is for me.
Right.
It absolutely can be. And then the reason I say that is if we were to take just the breadth and scope of the cybersecurity profession, there's so much. And a lot of it is not like this super pen test, red team hacker stuff. A lot of it is policy risk compliance. A lot of it is regulatory stands. A lot of it is if you're a linguist, right? You're a trained intelligence analyst. You're not a super hacker per se, but you understand all the great basics of cybersecurity, but you're really great at infiltrating dark web. You don't have to be a technical genius for that. You have to have other skills. Social engineering, big one. If you're going to do reverse engineering or for breaking software and finding vulnerabilities, yeah, that's a high technical bar to pass. But that's just like one example out of like 80 that exist. And sometimes you find amalgamations of all of those, and it's really unique to the organization. I can tell you at Cisco Talos, we have everything under the sun. We've got data scientists who are great threat researchers, but can take data, that 6 petabytes I mentioned. Mm-hmm. I can look at it with my eyes and have them not pop out of my head because I'm looking at 6 petabytes of data, right?
Right.
It has to be displayed in a cogent way that, a threat researcher like me can go hunt and look through, right?
Yeah.
We've got our linguists. We've got a really strong operations team because we have such huge IT demands for what we do inside of this organization. We've got strategic communications and marketing, which sounds so weird, but I mean, like a lot of that's my team. A lot of what I do when I'm not threat hunting is I get to sit on podcasts like these and talk to cool people and chew the fat, which is what I love to do. Right.
Right.
So like, if you think that there is something out there for you for cybersecurity, the answer is there probably is. Just doing your homework and networking and meeting people and going to conferences and things like that are really going to help you build a picture of what you want to do. And the last thing, because I talked to a lot of college kids about this stuff, and they go, man, they're like, I don't know what to do, man. There's so much out there, and I'm in school for cybersecurity. And I say, look, experiment, try stuff out, but know what your strengths are and just lean into them, and good things will happen because you're going to enjoy the things you're good at. And in cybersecurity, that might be me. I get to be a super nerd and be a threat researcher, but I get to talk to people. I'm living my dream, right? And having that good attitude and being easy to work with and being hungry technically, and good things will happen. Good things will happen. It's not the easiest answer. It's a very non-linear answer,
Oh yeah, no, but those are all fantastic characteristics, and I think I'll add one that because you described it, but you didn't say it. Just a curiosity. Like you'd better be curious about things because if you just always better be like asking why or looking for something. It's the job, right? I mean, you're curious as to human behavior, and it's amazing. I always say we hire a lot of college kids, and I shouldn't say the word kids. They are absolutely adults coming out of
Mm-hmm.
school and they're ready to contribute, but the ones that are curious just seem to be the ones that really like ramp up quickly,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good, well said.
with all the knowledge and data you have floating around in your head about everything that's out there, like it's got to get stressful. Like when you do turn the computer off, how do you learn to walk away from that knowing what's quote unquote out there?
I am not a great person to ask that question to because
Got
I
it.
sometimes I struggle with it. Um, it is. Somebody made a really good point. A guy I follow online, he's in the military. He does these really, really funny videos. And he said something one day that resonated with me, like in one of his like TikTok videos, which is don't be the uniform. Like,
Hmm.
don't let your career be your identity. And I was like, wow, that's pretty smart. And it's tough not talking about my career as my identity because I love what I do.
Right.
Um, and another thing that really messes with you is that like things are always going to be on fire in this business. Like I assure you, as I'm talking to you, some major cyber attack is happening somewhere, right?
Right.
And it's tough to turn off. It's a struggle because you create personal networking and wired in things um, that let you zone in on specific things. And if you get an alert at 2 a.m. and you're like, oh wow, that's wild, I want to stay up and research that.
Right.
Well, then a switch has been flipped, and you'll be up all 6 a.m. trying to find out more details. It's absolutely happened to me.
Yep.
So it is tough to find a way to turn off. And maybe I'm a little older and a little wiser. One of the things that I figured out is to just step away from my computer, period.
Right.
Like put my phone down, put it on do not disturb, go take a walk, don't touch anything electronic. And you have to for peace of mind because especially with the Ukraine stuff, like when I see pictures of bombed out buildings, I've driven by that building. I've walked by that building.
Right.
Right. And I'm thinking to myself, did somebody I know just get hurt or killed?
Yeah.
Right. And, you start to think about it in a lot of ways. If you let this stuff get to you, your cup is very full. And when something pours in, something has to pour out. And that could affect your personal relationships. That can affect your career. It can affect a lot of things that has happened to me personally. And sometimes you don't realize it until you've unfortunately stepped on that landmine. You're like, well,
Yep.
wow, I really need to take a break from this.
And you have one of those jobs too, where people are just inherently interested, and you've got to have some times where you're like, "Hey, can we just talk about the Orioles tonight, or some especially because they're having a great year."
Oh, they're having a just an amazing season right now. Go O's! Yeah, it is really tough. I think fortunately, and this is something that my leadership is pretty good about. But if you're a fellow cybersecurity professional, and you're a manager, just be mindful of your people's mental health and their state of being. A lot of stuff that we do is like really depressing, sobering stuff. I'm not in the good news business.
Right.
I'm what bad people are doing to good people business, right? And that means seeing a 501c that helps LGBTQ youth in Alabama get ransomware and then have all their private data disclosed because they didn't pay a
Oh man.
ransom. Or I'm seeing, a pediatric oncology center in Florida where the electronic health records of like 180 kids are now downloadable to anybody that wants to be on there.
Right.
Like all of this stuff is awful. Like we've had deaths caused from ransomware attacks in hospitals in the United States. And it's a thing that changes you, and you just got to recognize the signs of, man, I gotta look after myself, and it's
Yep.
not an easy thing to do because you're right. This is what I'm wired to do. This is what my colleagues are wired to do. This is why we do what we do. We want to make a difference, a good difference for others, and it's a balance. I wish
Yeah.
I had an easier answer other than it is a struggle, and you just need to have a good support structure to be able to deal with it.
The fact that the answer isn't easy is why I just say thank you to you and your group for everything that you're doing. And it's, just hats off to you. It's really commendable. Normally this is the part where I ask our guests if they have a call to action or a website or a podcast they want to plug, but I just kind of get the feeling if you're a bad actor out there, Joe and his team are going to find you. But Joe, if there's any place you want us to point our listeners for any other information about what you guys do, I'm happy to give you the space here.
Oh, hey, thanks. Yeah. So we have, our website's talosintelligence.com. We have our own very, very cheeky podcast called Beers with Talos, run by, 3 to 5 comedians. They're larger than life personalities who love talking about cybersecurity. Go listen to their latest one on the Barbie movie. It is fantastic. They are also some of the smartest cybersecurity professionals I've ever met in my career, and everything they say is straight wisdom, and I love listening to them. If you go to our blog on talosintelligence.com, you'll see a lot of blog posts.
Yep.
The thing that I want to convey here is there's no paywall, there's no marketing gimmicks, there's nothing. We publish a lot of really good, what I call nutritious, high-calorie content for both technical and non-technical folks. What are threat actors doing? What are their IOCs? What do we think this is doing from the meta or the macro or micro perspective? All of this stuff we give away. We want people to be protected. It is our social mission for you to do this. I can tell you, I sit behind the scenes. The amount of money we spend on those blog posts is ridiculous. But we would do it no other way. Because we want folks to be protected. So go check our blog out. Go if you want to laugh and want to hear some really thoughtful commentary in cybersecurity. Go listen to Beers with Talos. There's other cool tools. Snort.org, where our open source Snort engine is. You can go download and play with that. There's all kinds of neat stuff there. It's worth your time, I promise.
I know it is because I just really enjoyed our conversation today. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this week. We've been talking with Joe Marshall, Senior Security Strategist at Cisco Talos Intelligence Group. Joe, just thanks so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge about cybersecurity. Thanks for making me feel better to know that there are people like you out there who are looking out for us. I really appreciate that. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. Make sure to follow and subscribe to Innovation Heroes wherever you get your podcasts. Quick reminder, new video episodes are on YouTube. In case you're watching on YouTube right now, then just keep watching right till the end. We'll be back with another inspiring hero in 2 weeks. Until then, I'm your host, Ed McNamara. And Joe, thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
This episode was brought to you by Cisco. Recover from disaster stronger than before with the Cisco Secure Firewall. To learn more, call your SHI Account Executive or go to shi.com/Cisco. This episode is also brought to you by SHI's all-new generative AI briefings. Uncover your roadmap to innovation with a series of briefings and workshops designed by our technology experts. Contact your account executive or visit shi.com to learn more about our all-new executive briefings for generative AI.